to It's a Smile World, a festival celebrating the power in each one of us to change the world one smile at a time.
Sing happy songs, smile brighter each day. Welcome to all.
സ്വാഗതം. പുഞ്ചിരിക്കൂ, പൊട്ടിച്ചിരിക്കൂ. ഇത് സൗജന്യമാണ്.
नमस्ते, आप सबका बहुत बहुत स्वागत. आइए अपनी मुस्कान को चारों तरफ फैलाएं.
नमस्कार, भले मारा भले आसिफ तो खुश यूसुफ.
इन खुशियों की ऐलान के दुनिया संसार में आप सभी को बहुत बहुत स्वागत है. Namaste. I welcome you all to day 2 of the Smile Festival as we pay tribute to the unbridled and irresistibly infectious power of a brightly beaming smile. Day 1 saw some very inspirational sessions, and we feel privileged to have shared the space with some of the most renowned thought leaders. Let us ignite and inspire new thoughts and ideas with our distinguished Atithis who are here to grace us with their presence. How does one inspire and ignite new thoughts? Where do these ideas come from? What do they look like? And how do you know that your idea is a good idea? Well, we have no idea about this. But neither did Isaac Asimov when he wrote an essay in 1959 on how do people get new ideas. One thing he did realize and mention in his essay was the critical and rare ability to connect the dots in a unique way. We also know that ideas like to come unannounced. They like to jump from behind the cabinet or hide under the pillow as we try to sleep, or creep out from behind the leaves of a tree. And sometimes they hit us right on our head. But one thing is for sure, they hardly ever come when we are sitting, patiently waiting for them. Ideas often begin from dialogues in which an individual hears about a challenge and identifies a new way for solving it. It is therefore crucial to create space in which challenges are discussed openly and without fear, stimulating new solutions. An excellent historic example was Bell Labs, which for decades in the mid-20th century assembled creative physicists and engineers into a single corridor, where their daily conversations led to radio astronomy and the discovery of cosmic microwave background, as well as the inventions that include the transistor, photovoltaic cell, laser, and CCD, along with many other breakthroughs. An idea happens when other ideas, thoughts, memories, recollections, and experiences combine to form something new, something innovative, something that may work. In other words, to ignite and inspire new thoughts and ideas, we must come together and collaborate, share and exchange. I quote, "If you have an apple and I have an apple, and we exchange these apples, then you and I will still each have one apple. But if you have an idea and I have an idea, and we exchange these ideas, then each of us will have 2 ideas. So let's go out and exchange ideas in a never-before chance with our guest, Professor Sugata Mitra. His sole idea soon sparked more, and now we have an entire contagion to explore. finding rainbows in the cloud. Let us begin with today's sessions. At the School in the Cloud Learning Lab in the village of Korakati, India, students sit on colorful stools in front of computer screens, talking over Skype to educators in England and Germany. So, it might be surprising to discover that this high-tech education center was built in a place that can only be accessed by boat and rickshaw, where electricity was sparse and internet connectivity did not previously exist. In this digitized age, technology is being used by everyone: students and teachers, bosses and employees. Even after abundance of its usage, we still fail to give technology the credit and recognition it deserves. We haven't once tried to tap into the internet's infinitely huge ocean of knowledge. However, we are tremendously glad that someone did. He brought information technology to present-day classrooms unconventionally. I am talking about the 2013 TED Prize winner, a Leonardo European Corporate Learning Awardee, and the man behind the hole-in-the-wall experiment. Yes, we have amongst us Professor Sugata Mitra, one of the greatest educationists of the 21st century. A polymath, scientist, educational researcher, and speaker, Professor Mitra is a professor of educational technology at the School of Education, Communication, and Language Sciences at Newcastle University, and also the chief scientist emeritus at NIIT. He is widely acclaimed for his creative experiment on effective children learning the whole in the wall. Professor Mitra has been awarded the Best Education Research Article in an open access journal and the Divag Mehta Award for Innovation in IT, and has also been attributed with more than 25 cognitive science and educational technology inventions. We are truly privileged and honored to have you with us today. I accord a warm welcome to you, sir. The audience are requested to type in their questions for sir in the question and answer box. We shall take them up if time permits. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. It's always a little different talking over Zoom because obviously I can't see who I'm talking to, which is a bit strange. So it's a bit like, talking to yourself. But I've gotten used to it over the last 2 years, as I guess have many of you, because of the pandemic. So you heard a little bit in the intro about my old experiments, but then, the hole in the wall, that's more than 20 years ago. Many of you were not even born then, or very little. It only pointed the way towards a different kind of world and a different kind of education. But for the next 20 years, nothing really much happened. People listened. I got a lot of awards, this, that, and the other thing. But how much did schools change? Very little. What was I trying to say? I was trying to say that children, given access to the internet, can learn almost anything by themselves. A lot of people either did not like it or did not believe it. You know what is ironic? In the end, the pandemic brought it home. Suddenly, a virus closed the entire education system down. And I'm talking of, early 2020. We were all at home. How are we going to eat? How are we going to go to school? What happens to work? What happens to friendships? Who else can we talk to? How do we talk to them? In the middle of the lockdown, the entire world was struggling with these questions until we realized that between us and the virus, there is a friend, an ally, the internet. And since that time, it has stood between us and the virus, fighting everything the virus can throw at us, providing all the tools with which to build vaccines, to distribute, all over the world, to bring back education, to bring back friendship, to get food delivered, everything. Can you imagine what the pandemic would have been like if we did not have the internet? Just think for a moment, and you'll realize we would have just come to a halt. But we didn't. So what I'm going to talk about today is not so much about my old experiments, but the consequences of those experiments, what those experiments were trying to say when they repeatedly showed that groups of children using the internet can learn things by themselves. What does that mean today? What does that mean during the pandemic? And what does it mean after the pandemic? Let me share my screen. Okay. And there we are. So, you heard in the introduction that I was going to talk about a rainbow. Well, I am in a way, but that rainbow is not human. That rainbow is not even physical. That rainbow is the internet. You must remember something about the internet. And I could point it to you by simply asking you a question. Everybody knows that the internet exists, right? I mean, what a question. Of course it exists. We're using it right now. Well, my next question would be, where is it? Well, if you think about it, is it inside your computer? No, sort of. Is it in the air? Kind of. The internet doesn't have a physical existence. It is everywhere. That is the nature of a network. It doesn't have a physical existence, but nevertheless, it exists. It is an idea. And if you look at that screen, you'll notice the one thing that a virus cannot deal with is a non-physical idea. So there's the battle in front of you. Virus versus the internet. Well, so where do we go from there? What happens next? First of all, you'll hear people say all the time, when we go back to normal. And I keep thinking, what does that mean when we go back to normal? Go back where? To 2019, before the pandemic? Well, why not 2018? Why not the year 2000? Now, that's not such an easy question to answer, because in life, we often don't have the choice of going back anywhere. I mean, you know that, motor cars, vehicles, buses, trucks, they're causing a lot of carbon dioxide pollution in the atmosphere, which in turn is causing climate change or contributing to climate change. So what shall we say? Could we say, let's go back to normal and go back to the horse and carriage? Do you think that would solve the problem? Well, it probably would, but shall we do it? I'm sure we won't. We must understand we may never go back to where we came from, even if we could. And that is what schools all around the world need to realize and think about. So where shall we go? What are the choices that we have during the pandemic? If you see on the left-hand side is more or less what schools everywhere are doing. You know, we are creating virtual classrooms over the internet. And then we're saying they don't work very well because, you know, I'm the teacher and there's this virtual classroom, but I can't actually see all the students, or I see them as little postage stamp size images. That's not good. That doesn't work. We start blaming the technology, but it's got nothing to do with the technology. You're trying to create something using a medium that was not designed for that purpose. You are trying to make a motor car behave like a horse and carriage. That's not going to work, no? If you say, well, you know, I connected a couple of horses in front of my car and I told them to pull it, but then the car was too heavy, this technology doesn't work. But that's what we tried when we began making virtual classrooms over the internet. We tried to copy the pre-pandemic environment as closely as we could. You know, let's imagine that the student who is sitting at home will believe that he is back in school or she is back in school. It's exactly the same. Well, it is not. It is completely different. So it wasn't even worth trying. Let's teach vigorously, just like we do in school, and try to figure out if anyone is paying any attention. Well, how are you going to figure that out? I mean, can I make out right now how many people are listening? Can I make out if they're paying any attention, if they're understanding? You know, I couldn't even make out that my voice wasn't getting heard. So was that a fault of the technology? Of course not. It was a fault of the attempt to create an environment that this technology was not designed for. Then comes the question, quizzes, exams, CBSE, ICSE, or GCSE, all of that. What's going to happen? How are we going to conduct examinations over the internet? It's impossible. You see, students will cheat all the time. Nobody ever said, do we have to conduct those exams? Do we have to go back to normal? Is that normal? Well, for those of you who are facing a big exam shortly, next year or something like that, if I were to ask you, do you think it's very normal, the exam? Sitting alone in a room full of people, but not allowed to look right, look left, not allowed your phone, not allowed access to any books, given a question, and you're asked to answer it from your mind, like a TV quiz game show. Is that normal? You ask yourself. So what else can we do? Well, some schools broke out of that sort of thing. I encouraged them. And they created chat groups, social media groups. That worked fine. Everybody was on it all the time. They created new learning environments that I'll talk about in a moment. And they understood and realized something that is really very obvious. It's a stupid statement, number 3 on the right-hand side. Do not teach learners what they can learn by themselves. What can be more obvious than that? But do we ever take learners and ask them, okay, today I'm going to teach you about ceramics. Do you think you could learn this by yourselves? Well, no teacher ever asks that. She just says, I am going to teach this to you today, whether you can learn it by yourselves or not. Well, that's the time when the student then says, where's my phone? Why have you taken my phone away? And the school says, nothing doing. You can't use the internet. All right. Have we ever used any other method of assessment instead of CBSE exams? What are we trying to figure out? We're trying to figure out if you know math and science and the arts and everything. Can't I just sit across the table and say, listen, how good do you think you are at math? Do you like math? But if I'm a close friend, and if nobody knows that this conversation is being broadcast and that this is a one-on-one conversation, chances are you'll tell me the truth. You'll say, well, I don't particularly like math. Yes, I can pass an exam if you absolutely insist. They don't like the subject. Is that allowed for assessment? Not in the least bit. Imagine a CBSE certificate which says next to math, student not interested. Why not? So what can we do? But what are some of the new things that I tried during these last couple of years? I was stuck in Calcutta for almost 18 months, and I was doing this all over the world using the internet. It's amazing. From Iceland to Australia, sitting in my study in Calcutta, just as I'm sitting in my study right now in this little city called Gateshead in England. So what can we try over that sort of environment? Well, practice. There's nothing to stop you from practicing stuff. You don't need me for that. Experiment. Yes, if you have the apparatus, if you have a target, you can experiment. What can I as a teacher learn from children? A lot over the internet, a lot. Look at any of your grandparents, for example. Have you had the experience where a grandparent asks you to solve a little problem on their mobile phones? I'm sure many of you would have faced this. And you would say, no, that's simple. Your grandparents are willing to learn from children, but your teachers often are not. And then read about others' experiences. These are some of the things that you can do on chats and social media and video conferencing. We often forget that these are the good things you can do because we are so transfixed by the idea of the bad things that they can. Oh, they'll waste time all the time, and there's bullying on social media, and there's this, that, and the other thing. But so what? I mean, are buses bad because people can fall off them? Well, you just try to prevent people from falling off them, but otherwise buses are good. They take you from one place to another. It's the same with the internet and with social media. We have to learn to focus on the positive and to use those positives rather than focusing on the negatives and then stopping it from entering into schools. There are many kinds of learning environments that you can make using the internet. What I've tried, here's a small list of the things that I've tried. Breakout rooms during video conferencing. It's possible to create breakout rooms, and maybe some of your teachers have tried this. And then you invite people to say, okay, the 4 of you go into breakout room number 1, and 4 of you go into breakout room number 2, and so on. And there in the breakout rooms, you can discuss amongst yourselves, then you come back and you put your ideas together. There are some other fun things to do. I've tried several of these. A walkabout with a smartphone. You can take a smartphone like this one, put it in your breast pocket like this so that the camera sticks out. Put on headphones, connect to somebody, anybody, a group of people, whatever, and walk. And ask them to tell you where to go. It's amazing. I've tried this in Calcutta with children in England who then say, oh, What's that shop on the left? And I said, oh, that's a tea stall. Oh, but it doesn't have doors. No, we have a kind of climate where we don't need doors. Oh, how cool is that? And what are they frying? Oh, they're frying pakoras. What are those? I go close up and say, hey, can you see those? Oh, dumplings, they said. We had a great time, okay? You can walk about with a smartphone. Could you have done that without the internet? No way. You can take people from one place to another, just like that. There are other things you can try. Only voice and no video for language and communication. You can try this with your friends if you like. If a friend says, I have something very, very important to tell you, tell her, okay, switch your video off. Now tell me, when you're speaking and your video is off, there is no point in making hand gestures because nobody can see it. If you tried this in school, in language courses, you will notice an immediate improvement in communication. I have seen it across the villages of India, east, west, north, south, everywhere. Children who would start talking more slowly, more clearly. Children who would ask each other, "Samajh mein aaya?" and pause. How often do we do that when we talk to anybody? We assume that he has understood everything, and then we have a misunderstanding. And then we say, oh, but you didn't actually understand. Well, you can create an environment with only voice and no video and train people to talk. And then you can create only video and no voice. We had an instance of that in this talk some time ago. And what do we converse with? For gestures and pantomime. Imagine a situation where your friend says, I have something very important to tell you. And you say to him, okay, switch your audio off and tell me. So now what do? I can take a piece of paper, write things, show it to you, make hand gestures. I use the language of the mute. It's a wonderful language. You suddenly realize that what you wanted to express comes out completely differently if you're not allowed words. Only the internet makes that possible. Self-organized learning environments. When I first did the hole-in-the-wall experiments in Delhi and then all over India, I went on to do them in Cambodia, in South Africa. These experiments were very simple. You take a computer, just put it anywhere. Put it in the middle of a road, put it into a wall in a village or whatever. That's why they were called the hole in the wall, the computer stuck in the wall. And children were allowed free access to the internet on it. When we learned that children can learn to do this by themselves, I took this whole idea across to England. And inside the classrooms of Gateshead, the city where I live, we created the self-organized learning environment. How does it work? It's very, very simple. You ask a question. Instead of teaching, let's say I wanted to teach about ceramics. I might start by saying, if a teacup is made of mud, would it still be usable? What would we have to do to it to make it usable? That would be a big question. I don't teach you the answer. I simply ask you the question. I don't supervise you. I just tell you, okay, I'll give you 15 minutes. Use the internet. And then come back after 15 minutes and tell me what you found. You know what I will get in 15 minutes? My lesson on ceramics, coming out of the blue. It's a different role for a teacher, an upside down role. You might say, so do we not need the teacher? Of course you need the teacher. You need the teacher to raise the right question. You don't need the teacher for the answers, because the answers are everywhere. Assessment. How do we test? How do we examine? Well, to the teachers who are listening to this, would you agree that no one knows your students better than you do? Not even their parents. You've been with them for years and years and years. You know each child. So, what is it that you want to examine for? You know, the highest degree we have, it's called the PhD. Where you, how does it work? You're given a big question, a research question to which no one knows the answer. For 3 years, you struggle with it. For 4 years, 5 years. Finally, you write a thesis. Either an answer to the question or a partial answer to the question. And there is no examination. What there is a verbal examination called the viva. You sit across the table from 2 examiners, they ask you questions, and at the end of that conversation, they say, you're good. You know what you're talking about. You can have your PhD. Why can't we do that in class 6, in class 9, in class 10? Why can't your math teacher sit across the table from you for just 15 or 20 minutes and figure out how much math you know, and then give you a mark? It becomes a conversation, not a threat. And then you might say, well, you know, the teacher might have a bias, and I get along with my geography teacher, I don't get along with my Hindi teacher, etc. Well, use a panel of teachers. That's how they do it in PhDs. If 2 or 3 different teachers were evaluating, and if they didn't agree with each other, then you know there's something wrong. If they agreed, your exam's done in 15 minutes. Why don't we assess that way? Because we want to assess using a method that was invented more than 200 years ago for training, for military training, where everybody has to know everything exactly the same amount. You can use an examination for that sort of thing. If you've taught someone how to tie a knot, then you could give them a piece of rope and say, tie a knot. If you can tie a knot, you get 100 out of 100. If you cannot tie the knot, you get a 0. But that's not how you would test for English language proficiency or geography or history or whatever. We need a panel of teachers. We need a conversation. So what are our choices after the pandemic? I don't even know when after the pandemic will come. I mean, it's still on. We were waiting for our next wave, or we are just done with our wave, or whatever. India is waiting for the next wave. England is waiting for the current wave to subside, and so on. Well, I think here are some of the choices we have. We could say, okay, everything is back to normal. The virus is gone. Let's say that happens in 2022. Now we're going to, well, it's okay. We can forget about all that Zoom and everything. Let's just retain a little bit. We could retain all the hygiene habits. But why should we? I mean, we never did all that before the pandemic. We can create a hybrid model, physical and virtual presence. Oh, that is too hi-fi. I mean, in any case, the secondary board is not asking us to do that. We can use self-organized learning environments. Well, who wants it? Nobody. I mean, is the ICSE asking for it? No. We can change assessments from memory to comprehension, but nobody wants comprehension. They want memory, etc. How do we break out of that? Retain a few virtual environments, a few virtual elements, just to make the parents happy and everybody happy. Just so that people don't think that you're old-fashioned. Don't waste your money. It's better to throw all that junk away and go back to the classroom, if that's how you think. Retain all hygiene habits and practices. Have you guys noticed what everybody in the world is beginning to notice? That in the last 2 years, when we were all wearing masks, maintaining distance, washing our hands and that sort of thing. Apart from COVID, have you noticed almost nobody got a cold? It's only beginning to enter everybody's heads now. Gosh, I didn't catch a cold for a year. It's never happened to me in my entire life. I always catch 2 colds every year. So do we want to go back to catching colds every year? Masks, hand washing, and social distancing stops not just the COVID virus, stops all viruses, any virus. Why should we not retain those to whatever extent possible? The incidence of disease in your school will decrease, and the children will learn to be healthier. Is that such a bad thing? So what do you think? Shall we go back to normal? Throw away the masks? Keep your dirty hands? Hug and kiss each other all the time? You decide. Oops. New assessment models. You can assess comprehension, communication, and computing skills instead of memory. Just 3 things, comprehension, communication, and computing. You don't need anything else today. Think of what you do with your mobile phone, with your smartphones. You just use these 3 things: comprehension, communication, and computing. And you can solve almost any problem you want. Should we learn things in the first 17 years of our life and then say, now I'm ready to face life? But the world isn't like that anymore. The problems that we will face in the future have no bearing on many things that we learned in the past. So the answer to why you are taught all these old things is just in case if you need it. Trigonometry. Why do I need to know trigonometry? Just in case if you need it. Volcanoes. Why do I need to learn about volcanoes? Just in case if you need it. Well, why can't we change that to, if you do ever need it, I will teach you how to pull out your phone and learn it just in time. Think about that. It's a dramatic shift from keeping everything in your head to figuring it out instantly, quickly, and accurately. And use subjective and conversational methods for assessment. Like I told you earlier, don't stress out people by giving them question papers. Just ask them and figure it out for yourself how much they know. Reduce the stress. And finally, we must remember that the purpose of education is to enable people to live happy, healthy, and useful lives. Do you agree with that? But there's very little to disagree with, isn't it? Happy, healthy, and useful. That's what education is for. Every school, every parent, every teacher, and indeed every student must keep this in mind. The purpose of education is to enable people to live happy, healthy, and useful lives. Well, all of this stuff, I've finished what I had to say. And if you are interested in more references, well, there are 3 books which people who have done education as a subject in the university may have read some of them. The Hole in the Wall, which talks about the old experiments; Beyond the Hole in the Wall, which talks about the British experiments; and The School in the Cloud, which talks about what I did with the $1 million TED Prize. If you're interested in scientific research and research papers, then here's a paper you can get. You can download it for free, actually. Children and the Internet, Learning in the Times to Come. It was published quite recently in the Journal of Learning for Development. So look for it on the internet. It's very easy to find. And finally, if you are a school and if you're a teacher and you want to know, well, what should I do after I've heard all of you? I've heard everything that you said. So what should I do next? Well, there's a tiny little book which talks about a whole lot of examples of what you should do and how you should think at this point in time. It's called, as you might imagine, Virus versus the Internet. And you can get it from Amazon. It's a bit difficult to get in India, but there are ways to get it. I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out. Well, that's what I had. I hope it made some sort of sense, and I hope I didn't sit on my microphone again.
No, sir, we could hear you. We could hear you perfectly, sir. And thank you so much. After such an enriching and informative session, we look forward to transformational learning environments and out-of-the-box techniques to learn and discover new things. We would now like to open the floor to NiBS SMILE ambassadors who are very eager to interact with you, sir.
Okay. Come on, guys, ask a nasty question.
Namaste, sir. What
Namaste.
aspirations? Yes, sir. Namaste, sir. What aspirations did you have as a child? Were you always interested in science?
Yes, actually, I was. In ninth standard, one of our teachers made us write a one-page saying, write down what you want to become when you grow up. So I still remember what I wrote there, although that piece of paper is lost. But I wrote there that I'll try to become a scientist, and I'll keep on trying. But if I fail to become a scientist, then I'll do the next best thing I can do, which is I know how to write. So I'll become a writer. And as it turned out, I became a little bit of both.
Thank you, sir.
So, while I completely agree with you that we focus too much on the negative aspects of the internet and forget just how much it has revolutionized, I do want to focus on one specific problem, which is addiction. So how would you handle concerns of addiction to technology, taking into account how alluring internet and social media have become today?
Yeah, it's a good point that you're making, but I'm from another generation, and I'll tell you about another addiction that we had when I was a child. There were children who were called bookworms. Have you heard this term, bookworm? They read all the time. And my grandmother used to say, don't do that. Don't keep on reading all the time. It'll spoil your eyes. I mean, she used to tell my mother, your son is addicted to books. Okay, we know now in retrospect that it wasn't such a serious problem. I mean, yes, I read some bad books as well as I read some good books and all of that. So something similar is happening with the internet. But I want to make one other point, okay, very important for all of you guys to think about. We access the internet increasingly on little screens like that. Isn't that so? So if I'm looking at my screen like this, you have no way to tell what I'm looking at. No way. But on the living room TV, if you got addicted to the living room TV, could you look at anything that you shouldn't be looking at? You can't. Why? Because it's too big. Everybody can see what's going on. Our big mistake is to give children, particularly little children, big mistake to give them little screens. We should buy them a big high-resolution monitor, put it in the living room, and tell them you can do broadband internet and look at whatever you want. That'll solve the problem completely. No filters required, nothing. I've been saying this for years and years, but you know what? Nobody's listened. They keep looking at their tiny phones not because of children, but because the adults want their tiny phones. God knows what they do with it.
So I'm sure all the parents here will start listening. Thank you.
I hope so. Thanks.
Hello, sir. Talking about social media, I believe you did talk about how it can be used for learning. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, my whole approach to learning has been to tell the learners what is it that I want them to learn. Okay, first I must convince you. Suppose I am your teacher and I'm going to teach you something. I should first be able to convince you that it's worth your time to learn this. If you don't agree with me, then you'll never pay any attention. Okay. So first of all, let's assume that there are 4 of you. 4 is a good number. There are 4 of you. I tell you that, okay, I'm going to talk to you about RNA and what it is and why it's so important, something like that. And let's suppose that the 4 of you then agree. Then I would say to you, well, I don't know much about it myself, except that it's a very interesting subject. So why don't I give you 24 hours? You guys figure it out. That's when social media comes in. So you'll go onto Facebook and say, we've got this crazy teacher, he says he wants us to learn RNA, but doesn't know anything about it himself. And then it goes on here and goes on there and goes on to YouTube and it goes viral here and there. And finally, somebody from Ethiopia says, I know a lot about RNA. Let me tell you all about it. And then the problem gets solved. So that's how social media works. It didn't exist before, so teachers don't understand it. And they think that all you're doing all the time is wasting time on it. But if you look at your behavior on social media and analyze it, how much time do you actually waste as opposed to how much time do you spend on fairly meaningful conversation about how people are, what their problems are, what the solutions might be, about new subjects, about your stresses and your strains and all of that. And as I said before, if you had a big screen, you would spend a lot less time on social media than you would now. Okay, you wouldn't do chitter chatter on a big screen where everybody can see that you're wasting your time. But if you were having a conversation about RNA with a child in Ethiopia, you don't care if your screen is big. You would continue to do it, right? So I want to stress again, big screens, big screens.
Yes, sir. I believe that will bring out the true meaning of connectivity on social media.
Yeah.
Sir, most of us think language is a barrier, but your experiments have proven otherwise. Do you think this information can be used to conserve vernacular languages?
Yes, I was, it's a very nice question. I was I had a mixed opinion about it. I thought that eventually we will all have to come to the conclusion that we cannot survive without English. Okay, that out of the billions and billions of people on the internet, English will continue to be big language. I used to think that. I was wrong. I didn't figure out how quickly other languages would start coming into the internet. It happened much faster than I thought. And it happened because of popular pressure. I mean, let's say that a person knows only Gujarati. He too wants to be able to look up Wikipedia and to do Google searches and so on and so forth. Other people figure, well, there's some business in this. Why don't I make a Gujarati version of Wikipedia? Why don't I do this and that? There were people who developed fantastic algorithms for online translation. Okay. Initially, we used to laugh about it. We still laugh because it makes horrible mistakes. But the point is, it works. By and large, it works just fine. The time will come very quickly where I could be speaking in Bengali, you could be replying in Tamil, but the conversation will come out in English automatically. It's just around the corner. When that happens, the entire meaning of language will have changed. It will no longer matter whether you have vernacular or not. And coming to the original bit, that what should we do with the vernaculars? Of course, the vernaculars must exist. Some of the best literature, some of the best poetry in the world is in languages which are not English. We can't afford to let that go. But luckily for us, the internet is taking care of it. The technology will even out the barrier.
Thank you, sir. Whatever you said reflects in the internet.
Yeah, well, that was good questions. Go ahead.
So, what is one major reform you would like to bring about in the education sector?
Just say again. I couldn't hear the first part of what you said.
My question is that what is one major reform you would like to bring about in the
Okay.
education sector?
Okay. So her question was, what's a major reform that I would suggest?
Yes, sir.
Very simple, very straightforward. Okay. I want the examination system to be changed completely. This whole idea of you've got a A plus in physics and you've got a B minus in history doesn't mean anything. I mean, what does it mean? You might love chemistry and get a C in chemistry, and you might dislike physics and get an A plus in physics, and the system will say you have to study physics. Why can't we go back to a system which says, here are the things that I like, and here are the things that I'm good at, and they're not always the same. Just think to yourself, there are things that you like and may not be very good at. You wish you were good at it. And there are things that you're very good at, but you don't particularly like doing them. The examination system doesn't take that into account, and it must. So my quick answer to your question, we have to change the examination system.
So we have access to a vast amount of knowledge thanks to modern technology. How can a student of Seoul learn to discern between useful information and misinformation?
Well, that brings me to another important point. I talked just a few minutes ago, I talked about the big screens. Remember that a big screen is safer. The second thing is groups of children or groups of learners are safer than individual learners. Think to yourself, if there were 4 of you, you and 3 of your friends, and you are looking up the internet on a big screen, which all 4 of you can see at the same time, isn't the probability that you will get fake news and not be able to figure it out, isn't that reduced a lot? Because you see something on the screen and one of your friends will say, hey, bakwas hai, this is useless stuff. Don't look at that. Look at the website. Look at the website address. It doesn't mean anything. 4 heads are better than 1. And in a self-organized learning environment, what I create are 4 or 5 groups of 4. So 16 or 20 people. So if there are 20 people, you make 5 groups of 4 with 5 big screens. Then you give them the question. And let me tell you this, you'll never get them to believe any false information. The group will self-correct. Okay? It's a fantastic ability that human beings have of being able to self-correct and get to the truth if they're in groups. The whole problem is in being alone with a tiny screen.
Thank you for that wonderful answer, sir.
Thanks.
Sir, how would you handle subjects that children may not necessarily be interested in learning about through the method of minimally invasive learning?
It's it's a question of whether you can make a question that is interesting enough. I'll give you an example, okay? A rather hilarious example. In London once, I was having a similar meeting physically before the pandemic. And the teacher said, Professor Mitra, I am going to give you a problem you won't be able to solve. I said, what's that? She said, my subject is gum health. Gums? Gum health. And she said, there is nothing less interesting than that in the entire universe. So you tell me, how can I make 7-year-olds interested in gum health? So there was this challenge. So I went in feeling quite nervous. Gosh, how am I going to do this? So there they were, 7-year-olds. Now, obviously, if I said, I have come here to teach you gum health, they'll all fall asleep. So instead of that, I said, how many of you have missing teeth? And because they're 7 years old, many hands went up. Okay. Oh, I've got 2 teeth fallen out. I said, oh, that's odd. So what's going to happen to you? 2 teeth have fallen off. So they said, no, sir, don't worry, they'll grow back. So I said, oh, that's even more amazing. First of all, why does it fall off? And secondly, why does it grow back? And they said, well, you know, it's baby teeth. I said, well, I mean, it's obvious you don't know the answer to that. And I have another question. So they fall off, they grow back. If they fall off the second time, then what happens? Then they said, oh, they don't grow back the second time. So I said, that's even worse. They grow, they fall off, they grow again, and they fall off the second time and they never grow back. Do you know why that happens? By now, the 7-year-olds are sitting up and saying, do you know? They said. I said, no, I don't know either. But you've got the internet. And 30 minutes later, we had a lesson from the 7-year-olds about how gums hold the teeth and how gum health is very important. So then I told the teacher, I didn't tell them that. They told us why gum health is important, and that's better learning than anything you can imagine. So do you get a flavor of what I'm trying to say? You have to create the right question. If you can't, then whatever you were trying to teach is actually very boring. You know, and so that I would say to your teachers, that if you walk into a class and if you're not really interested in what you're teaching, go home.
Thank you, sir, for that hilarious anecdote.
Thank you. Okay, I think I better be off, you know. My time's almost up. Where is everybody? There you are.
So
okay.
yes, sir. A few questions from the audience. Can you spare a few minutes for that?
Okay, let's do 3. Okay.
All right, sir. So would you take one more from the students and then we move on to the audience questions?
Okay.
All right. The next person can ask the question and then we'll move on to the audience question.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Sir, can a traditional school incorporate self-organized learning environments, the souls, in their pedagogy without altering much of their infrastructure? And do you think it is practical?
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to incorporate. It doesn't require any expensive changes or anything like that. And many schools in India and in many other countries have already got rooms which they use for doing souls. I have some lovely pictures. If your principal is interested, I can send her those pictures. All those books contain the design. So the design is very simple. More importantly, when should you do it? According to me, at the moment, you should do it up to 9th grade, 9th standard, maybe 10th, but not more than that, because then you've got the big exams coming. And remember, a soul doesn't help you with the exam, because the soul is about working together, working with the internet, up to that. So I would recommend to schools that they should set up a soul environment and they should conduct souls from a very young age up to the 9th standard, so that the children get used to using the internet properly. After the 9th standard, as long as the system doesn't change, you have to tell all the learners like yourself that I'm sorry, I couldn't change the system. So for the next 2 years, memorize everything, regurgitate it in the exam, and then forget about it.
Thank you, sir. And we would love if you could share your designs, like you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, just ask them to send me a reminder email. I'll send some pictures.
Yes, sir.
Also like
yes, sir. Our principal ma'am would like to respond to that. She's just...
Sugata sir, I would love to receive those photographs.
Okay, all right.
Do other sessions as well. You are a NiBS Mitra now, so we will be hounding you for a lot of things.
Okay. Thank you. I'll send you whatever I can. So yeah, it will be a good idea if you set up these rooms, and if the teachers sort of, if once one teacher gets the hang of it, then she can explain to everybody else. It's quite simple. And I can put you in touch with people who know how to conduct these sessions. They will show you 1 or 2 sessions and then you take over.
That'll be great, sir. That'll be great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Yes, Indu ma'am, carry on.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So, sir, this was a very interesting and thought-provoking session. And as a teacher, I was taking notes of about all the ideas that you came up with, the methodology that we can use in class. The walkabouts are a wonderful idea. I never thought of it. Yes, but yes, it's definitely a brilliant idea. And even the pantomime, I mean, it's amazing for a language. I, being a language teacher, would love to use
Okay,
this.
you would understand. Yes, that's right.
Yes,
And
sir.
and even this whole idea of talking just a voice without the video. You'll notice how many mistakes we make because we think that people can read it in our faces.
Yes,
So
often the communication, yes.
yeah, that's right. So we say yes, 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 like this, but without realizing the other fellow can't see your head nodding.
Absolutely, sir. So, sir, the question is kind of in the sense that we were talking about soul schools and ideas and all of those things. But this particular question that has come up is about Slumdog Millionaire. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, of course.
So,
Yeah.
sir, the question is that I mean, the way it was portrayed, it's claimed that it's based on your experiment. So, do you think it was a befitting kind of a portrayal of your idea there? We just wanted to know your opinion.
Well, I mean, I actually know the facts. You see, when the Slumdog Millionaire film won those awards, the BBC here in England, they interviewed the writer of the book which became the film, and his name is Vikas Swaroop. He's basically an IFS officer, and he wrote a book called Q&A. So BBC interviewed Vikas Swaroop and said, "What made you write a story like this?" And Vikas Swaroop says on BBC, when I was a lot younger, there was a man who conducted an experiment called the hole in the wall. And that became my inspiration for writing this book. And I was teaching my class in Newcastle University when one student sort of burst into the classroom and said, "Sir, BBC is talking about you." They're saying. So I said, "Okay, what about me?" So then I wrote to Vikas Swaroop and I said, "Is this right? I mean, I'm very proud to hear that." And he said, "Yes, sir, I really remembered that experiment and I wrote it." My only comment to you and other viewers is that Vikas's story was how self-organized learning can help you win the Kaun Banega Crorepati. But I wanted to say self-organized learning can help you become a professor. And that is perhaps a better objective than to win the Kaun Banega Crorepati. And I said that on another interview with the Guardian newspaper. And I said, it would have been so much better if Vikas's story ended with one of those children becoming a professor. And guess what? The Guardian wrote an article, a huge article here in England. And the title was, with my picture, the title was Slumdog Professor.
Yes, that was very interesting. I'm so happy that we asked this question. So another question, and this is the last one, virus versus the internet, the book, I think the most recent, right?
Yes.
Was this book written after the pandemic set in, or was it already written in a different context and different thought behind it?
No, I get your question. I wrote this in the middle of 2020 from Calcutta, because I was on meetings over Zoom every day with teachers like yourselves, because, you remember in 2020 how confused we all were. And they used to talk on Zoom and saying, "Sir, what should I do? Should I organize a class over the internet or should I not?" So I kept talking. And after some time, I realized that there were 15 things that I was talking about. So I said, why don't I just write this down in a really tiny book? It's only 50 pages long. And put these 15 ideas for teachers to say, just keep this in your mind and then address this issue of internet education. So that's how that book got written, in the middle of the pandemic.
All right. So the children and the internet is easily available on the internet. We could read through it also. But virus versus the internet, I couldn't even find an extract from that book. So
no, that's difficult. I'll tell you how you can do it. Good thing you asked. These are called POD books, meaning print on demand books. And Amazon doesn't have a print on demand service out of India. So it will say not available when you look it up on Amazon. But there is a website, it's an amazing website. It's called bookdepository.com. Okay, bookdepository.com. You can order any book under the sun from anywhere in the planet, and they don't charge you postage also. They will charge you just the price of the book and it comes. But then the downside is it takes 4 weeks. Okay. So if you're planning to buy for the school, then you should buy 3 or 4 copies. Many of these schools have done that. Buy 3, 4 copies together and from book depository, get the books and then give it to the teachers. That sort of thing.
And we'd like you to send us one autographed one as well, sir.
Yes, as soon as I get one. But the problem is that I have to buy one myself as well. So, but yes, no, I will do that. I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. It's lovely meeting all of you, and all the best for your school, for yourselves. And well, what shall I end with? I'll just end with the line I started with. Don't go back to normal, okay? There is no such thing. All right.
Yes, sir.
See you
Definitely,
then.
sir.
See you then. All right. Bye now.
That was truly an exhilarating session. And I must say that your innovative ideas in education will enthuse, inspire, and ignite the young minds to think truly out of the box. Not only did we all learn today that technology and internet is a driving force during the pandemic, but also that accepting reality as it is the right choice to make. Thank you so much for spending your precious time with the SMILE community, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you and goodbye.
The grey clouds of crisis poached our pace and peace, but gave us the gift of time. For in the pre-pandemic days, time was a lost treasure. We were always in a rush, hastening and hurrying, flying and chasing things that we believed were dear to us. Like bionic machines, we functioned with gears and hardware working in overdrive, while our minds and brains, our operating systems, focused solely on one objective, to achieve as much as possible. Our heart was too busy to be a heart. We were seeking happiness from the outside, ignoring the fact that it lives only inside. But the contagion brought about a change by bringing our worlds to a thundering stop. Along with time, it also gifted us the timeless wisdom of insight. The fact that an itsy-bitsy virus, a small speck in the complex mechanism of life on Earth, could reduce the entire human race to a scatter, reminded us of how, despite all its power to transform nature, humankind remains just another fallible species on planet Earth. It was as if everything in the world just went into pause mode. But as it did, it taught us also to be in the moment, to be present for ourselves in our hearts. And in doing so, we felt for the first time the fullness and peace of coming home. Perhaps we were all like fuzzy caterpillars before the virus and are now chrysalises in lockdown, waiting to emerge like butterflies, brave, bright, and beautiful. We've already realized that our world is wide and wonderful. The little things, the little moments, they aren't little. They are big, wide, and deep. Our hearts are a great big source of richness. And the wealth of the heart is one that we can ill afford to squander or lose. It lies at the very core of our beings, an infinite reservoir of joy, powerful love, and compassion, tempering and transforming with tenacity the hard lessons of life to make us feel better and not bitter. It may be on our left, but we know well that it is always right. As Holly McGee says, your heart can hold everything, including the world, its darkness and its light, including your story, including my story, including the story of all of us. So let's come together then to listen to the voice of the heart as we learn about how to find courage in times of crisis with Dr. Amit Sen. As a child, he started by wanting to become a bus driver, changed his aspirations to being a doctor at an epiphanous moment, and was driven to become a footballer through his adolescent years. He dreamt of being a rock star during his medical college days till he realized that he had no talent for it, and finally reconciled to become a doctor after all. This is the renowned Dr. Amit Sen, a leading child and adolescent psychiatrist of India. Working with children, football and rock music, dreams and aspirations have all come together for him. Through the myriads of magical and fulfilling experiences, Dr. Sen feels that he has developed empathy over the years and can connect to children and their families. In doing so, he hopes to make a difference, however little, in their lives. Dr. Amit Sen is the director and co-founder of Children First, the leading institute for child and adolescent mental health that aims at providing clinical and developmental services, school mental health programs, community outreach, and research work. He is also the founder head of the mental health team at Salam Balak Trust, an NGO working with street children. He has been in the field for more than 30 years. His work involves psychotherapy, service development, training, awareness building, community collaboration, and advocacy in the area of neurodevelopmental difficulties in children and school mental health. He has worked with national and international organizations like the UN Human Rights Commission in the area of child sexual abuse and juvenile justice. It is a great honor to have Dr. Sen here with us today. I am certain all of us present here will be able to relate to his thoughts and benefit from them. Finding courage in times of crisis with Dr. Sen. Over to you, sir. I request the audience to type in their questions in the Q&A section so that they can be taken up at the end of the session if time permits.
Wow, thank you, Harshaditya. I'm already overwhelmed, and I'm, beginning to wonder how to take this discussion forward after having listened to our esteemed previous speaker, and indeed somebody who I admire and I've known about the hole in the wall for the longest of times. Do you know? Just let me share my screen and see if I can get to the. Just a second. I'm trying very hard to. Yeah, got it. I think I got it. Yes. So thank you very much indeed to include me in this absolutely wonderful forum that you've created. I think SMILE, as I've known it, over the last 1.5 years, has done path-breaking, inventions in education, I have to say. And I think the effects of it has been far-reaching. The other thing, if I could request some of you to switch on your cameras, because, I've been doing webinars since the lockdown began 1.5 years ago, but I still find it so hard to talk to a screen, right? So it'd be really wonderful if you could, some of you could switch on your videos and I can see your faces and talk to you rather than the screen. Yeah. So, I'm, thank you so much indeed, Harshaditya, Jugnu ma'am. Yeah. And I'm on a short break right now. I'm on the mountains, and the mountains have been our favorite place to come for short breaks. Particularly after this pandemic, it's after months that we have managed to take a break and get away from home. So you can imagine our relief and our wonder at what we see here now. As I said, I've been coming to the mountains forever, and I remember during as I was driving up this time, I was remembering that during my teenage years and when I was a young adult, there used to be these big slogans written on the rock faces, as you climb the mountain. And one of them would say this particular slogan. It would say, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And at that point in time, I used to find it, really cool. And I thought, wow, that's a cool slogan. And I thought that I was one of those people, who would, pick up a challenge if there was one. However, as I grew up and as I started reflecting on on the slogan and what toughness or courage means, it took on many layers. I realized that toughness or courage is not just about being gung ho and put on a brave persona and throw caution to the wind. It's not quite like that. And what this pandemic has taught us, in recent months and the last 1.5 years, has only made that understanding much more deeper and layered. And I'd like to share some of those about what does courage actually mean during this time. And I have realized that this kind of a slogan is probably not what works during the pandemic and the lockdown. Yeah, would you agree? So uh, let's kind of let me take you through a story of one of the young persons I have actually had the fortune to get to know during this pandemic. Let's call her Ria. Ria is 15, and Ria came to us in the middle of a crisis. And what we got to know about Ria is that she was indeed a very talented all-rounder, and a very outgoing person, and was, besides of course being good in academics, she was involved in all kinds of activities in school. However, she was really struggling to cope with the lockdown. And the uncertainty of board exams. So at 15, she was in grade 10. There was no certainty as to how that would pan out this year, but what happened in the middle of all this is that she lost her Nani. She lost her maternal grandmother during the second wave. And she was, of course, not very far away, in the NCR. But due to the lockdown and due to the situation then, she could not go and, be with the extended family, grieve in the way that we usually want to do during such times, So, and shortly after that, can you imagine that both her parents got COVID as well? So Ria got isolated in their home with her 8-year-old brother while the parents were living in 2 rooms that were shut. Yeah. At first, I mean, this completely shook her up from the core, and she was paralyzed with fear at first, helpless, crying often, unable to sleep. But within the next few days, up to a week or so, she started picking up the pieces and started taking care, taking hold of the household, taking care of the meals, the cleaning up, connecting with neighbors to see that they get what the bare essentials are. And she started looking after her 8-year-old brother, helping him with online classes, and also with structuring his day. She took out old books and board games, old books that their parents used to read to them, both to Ria and her brother. And she started reading it to her brother. And they started watching the cartoons they used to do when they were younger together, and that really brought back a sense of purpose in her life, and of course she also then shortly afterwards started reaching out to her cousins and friends, started playing online games, chatting, and all of that, right? And what's more, she started reaching out to even friends who had their own crises. In fact, one of her very close friends lost her mother, and another a friend's father was in the ICU. And every day she would reach out, and she understood the pain and the confusion and how sensitive the situation was for both these, friends of hers, because she had gone through it herself, and she could actually tell other people not to intrude, not to push for, chats, etc. Because these people, while they needed the support and they needed to know that people were there for them, they also needed their personal space. And she was so good in negotiating that with the rest of the friends that they had, And of course, she was ever so thankful for the boards getting cancelled eventually, So that was Ria's story. And I wonder whether you find that despite her, initial helplessness and the crying and acknowledging that she was going through hell, absolutely, does she not come through as somebody who is full of courage? So what does it constitute? What does courage constitute during crises like this? Is something perhaps that we can think about. But before that, maybe we could take stock of what has this pandemic done to us? What kind of a crisis is this after all? I'm sure all of us go through some crisis or the other, but this is unlike any other. This is unprecedented. And I don't think any of us have ever seen a crisis like this in our lifetime. Unless, of course, you are more than 100 years old and you were there during the Spanish flu, and even then you had to be at least 10, I think, to grasp uh, what was going on. Or perhaps, some of the countries who were in the thick of the Second World War, they might have seen years of crises like this, But I don't think that it still came to signify how global this disaster is. It's reached every corner of the world. Of course, it is natural and partly man-made as well. And it is, as a result of that, it's deeply traumatic and damaging, to people's psyche, to their emotional health, and all of that. And of course, it has filled us with paralyzing fear, some real, some imagined, and it's relentless and pervasive. It means it's got into, its homes, schools, institutions, on the streets, everywhere, indeed, And what that had done is, of course, you know, uh, 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 given us a lot of fear and anxiety, no doubt, right? It's very hard to confront this reality. It's very scary indeed, and I know of so many people who talk about trying to distract themselves. They want to. Some of them have said, "I've signed off from Twitter." Others have said, "I don't watch the news anymore." Still others said that I don't, first thing in the morning, I don't check my WhatsApp messages, and I try to distract myself. I've heard it so many times, and yet, does it stay away? Does the fear and the anxiety, does it go away if you turn your head away from it, right? Actually it doesn't, because it's there in the air, isn't it? Yeah, it's everywhere, and it seeps into our bodies and minds because it's there in the conversation. It hangs like a gray cloud in homes and other social spaces, doesn't it? Right? And even if you don't talk about it, it's going to get to you, right? And that's the important thing to understand, that not confronting it, not talking about it, not you know uh, facing up to it does not completely take it away from your life, right? And if you even if you do not confront it, right, in head on, it still begins to seep into you and it begins to manifest in these various ways. And I'm sure many of you would have, over a period of time, perhaps, experienced things like not being able to sleep at night, or eating at odd hours, or craving for junk a lot of the times. And I know that these are flashpoints in many homes where, parents get extremely worried when these things begin to happen with the young people at home. Lots of younger children have talked about getting aches and pains, feeling nauseous in the morning, not being able to get up for online schooling, feeling tired, not wanting to get out of bed. And of course, there have been mood swings, feeling always on the edge, snapping easily, feeling frustrated and angry, lashing out in anger, and regretting later. Ever so often, we find these things become a part of your lives, isn't it? Yeah. And of course, there have been fights and arguments, and there have been young people who have turned around and said, who do we trust? Who do I turn to? Because everything that you trusted, every person that you banked upon, perhaps no fault of their own, have not been able to be there for you. So then where do you go from there? And that has been a common refrain amongst young people that I've known. Yeah. And there have been other consequences of the lockdown. How the daily rhythm of our days, the daily life, how you woke up on Monday morning and went to school, and then, you met up with friends and had your classes. Some you liked, some you didn't. You came back home, had your lunch, and then perhaps did some homework, went out to meet friends, came back, spent some family time. Monday, doesn't it seem, right? It seems that it's so, but yet this kind of rhythms and sequences that we have in our in our lives, they give us a structure, and they make us feel that things in our life is within our control. They're predictable, and it makes us feel safe, and we don't realize it till it's taken away. Because once this disruption happened, of course, at the beginning, if you remember the first lockdown when it happened, so many young people were so happy. Oh, there's no school, both our parents at home, we have so much family time, and we watch movies together till late in the night. But it didn't last for more than 4 to 6 weeks, if you remember, right? And everything started caving in, started coming crashing down, and the anxiety started building up, the confusion, the unpredictability of the immediate future, particularly for some of y'all who were perhaps preparing to get into high school or go to college, right? And how tough it was then to even foresee what the future might be like. And then, of course, the institutions broke down, and that included school, colleges, transport system, hospitals. Everything came to a grinding halt. Of course, I know, and I've been associated with your school to an extent, and I know how well they have dealt with the pandemic, and all of you together have built a community and pulled resources from within and from within your community to build something like Smile, which is indeed so innovative. But I don't think that e- uh, every young person was just as lucky as that. I think most people had to go through the grind in a very different way, and I've seen many young people come to me absolutely in despair, where they don't know, again, there's a who to trust. So there's been a breakdown of trust there, and also a breakdown of identity, if you can think about it like that. But what else is our identity but in places that we belong? And what is one of the main spaces that we belong in? It's our school, isn't it? It's our group of friends that we go to. It's the kind of activities we do, whether it be art or theater or play football. Those are the kind of things that constantly nourish what you want to build as your identity. And if that gets taken away, then you begin to question, who am I? And begin to have deep doubts about it. Yeah. So that is again something that we saw in so many young people. And of course, there was a complete loss of pleasure and joy, and there was a disconnect with people, purpose, and any kind of meaning in life. Yeah. So and the meaning comes from the choices that we make. I mean, just to think that um, before the lockdown, most of the things that you wanted was really at a press of a button, right? Whether you wanted to meet a friend, go for a coffee, or go for a movie, or or join a new music class, it was all there for your asking. You could make those choices, and that brought so much of joy and meaning, and that got taken away too, right? And as a result of that, there was a range of intense feelings that we all went through, I think, from time to time. It came in waves, and it came at different times in different people's lives, starting with frustration, helplessness, disbelief, hopelessness, a deep sense of loss and grief and sadness, fear and anxiety, of course, and no doubt trauma and its aftermath. We don't have the time or the space to go into a lot of the details of this, but I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with what I'm talking about. I'm sure that even if you haven't gone through something like this in this intensity, you might have seen some close friends, some family members, and your schoolmate, classmates go through some of this, isn't it? Yeah. The second wave, of course, is uh, hit us, like a ton of bricks, just when we were beginning to raise our heads, just when we were beginning to, very cautiously begin to look at hope again. It came crashing down on us. And this time, while in the first wave, for many of us, COVID and the pandemic was at a bit of a distance, wasn't it? It was happening to people who were careless with things. And we felt that if we are we do the social distancing, wear our masks, wash our hands on a regular basis, then we won't get it. And indeed, that's how it was. For most people, you would not get it if you took precautions and you do the protocol, but not in the second wave. Because in the second wave, I know of people, including the elderly, who hadn't stepped out of their homes for, a year and a half, who still got it. Everybody or anybody could get it. Yeah. And that's what made it so devastating. And the death and the grief that you saw from so close. Um, I don't know of anybody who cannot talk about at least one person or maybe more people they know who have passed away, passed on. Yeah. So, and of course, things had started opening up, after the first wave the first lockdown was easing out, and, people had started stepping out, going out, the movie theaters have started opening. A lot of the extracurriculars were coming back again into their lives. Although school was not open, but now the coaching centers had opened. And bang, again, there was this place where you could not at all step out, much worse than the last time. And there was no doubt a lack of personal space, too much time with family members. Wouldn't you agree, right? And you started rubbing each other on the wrong side. There was a blurring of personal, family, and school and office spaces, wasn't there, right? And I'm sure a lot of you would agree that there was excessive screen, yeah, because screen was being used for everything: work, entertainment, social life. So hard to tease it out and say that this is useful and this is not, especially for parents who are getting increasingly anxious and thinking about screen addiction, what's going to happen, will they ever come out of this, and so on, right? I'm sure some teachers I can see are listening, and I'm sure some friends, so some of your parents are too, and I'm sure they can resonate with the anxieties and the fear they've gone through during this time, right? And like I said, this repeated breakdown of emerging hope, this blurred sense of future. Where are we headed? what are we, going to get after this, right? So all those kind of things had started hitting us. So, and it's important to understand this, because only then, and I think this is where, the understanding of courage has to be different, because it has to be a lot more nuanced. It has to be with a deeper understanding of what we're going through right now, isn't it? Yeah. So what is courage then, right? Is it, like I said, you know, a slogan, you know, taking it on your face and saying, here I am, nothing will touch me. I'm so brave and so on. It's not quite like that, is it? In fact, I know of people who perhaps started off like that, but then, found it increasingly hard as the lockdown, kept going. So in our mind, yeah, so is it about conquering fear only? Perhaps it is, to an extent. It is partly to do with conquering fear, but it is a lot more than that. And we believe that courage actually is about so many different things. And this understanding, I must share with you, has come from our collaborative working with young people and families. So when we do see families and young people, at Children First, we often do not take an expert position. We are not there to tell you or other people, people who approach us, what is wrong with them and how they can fix it. We indeed take a very collaborative stand where we often say to them that they are the experts uh, about their lives, on their lives. They are the experts. And we are the facilitators of helping them understand, what their strengths are, what their resources are, how they can dig in. Yeah. And that indeed is something that we often share with other people. So we often take permission from a young person or a family and take it to another young person and said, you know what? I've met another 15-year-old without taking the name. Yeah. And this is what they had to say about what they're going through. What does it do you resonate with this, and so on. So a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about now from here onwards is knowledge which has come from this collaborative work, right? And we believe that indeed courage has all these components to it, right? And the first thing, although it's towards the side, is acceptance, right? And then you have connect and compassion, and of course you have to be creative and adaptive. And like you all believe in your project Smile, it is to do with community. Yeah. So all these things make courage. And let's have a more nuanced, detailed look at how that would play out for us, right? Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to take up is acceptance. Yeah. Accepting of what is, the challenging times. And from the last bit of conversation I heard with Mr. Sugata, I could sense, I could see that I apologize. Yeah. Just give me a second. Yeah. And suddenly things have started popping up here. I'm not, anyhow. So, yeah, so acceptance of the challenging times that we live in, right? And to, cut some slack and say that, yes, these are tough times and we may not get everything perfectly right. We may flounder through things some of the times, right? We may not be able to wake up for every online class just on time. Yeah. We may not be able to do the exercise that our parents or well-wishers are asking us to do, right? It's sometimes just not possible. And that is because it is a challenging time for me, for you, for the family, for friends. And the first thing to do is to be able to accept that, right? And from there onwards, we can begin to look at some of the other things. I've clubbed compassion and creativity and adaptability for a reason. And as we go along, we'll get to know that. Compassion, of course, is again very, very important for you to connect to people in these times. It is also important to understand from some of the things that we discussed in terms of how this pandemic has hit us, is that in a crisis like this, when there's so much of fear and anxiety, trust and a sense of emotional well-being goes away. Yeah. You can't find it anymore, right? And if you cannot find it, then it's very hard to reach out. It's also, if you're constantly anxious and fearful inside, very hard to become creative and adaptive. So the first thing that you need to actually do is begin to create emotionally safe spaces. And that's where the creativity comes in. And it takes it takes all of us, I think, a bit of effort, and it has to be with a stretch away from our comfort zone. Our comfort zone right now is probably just withdrawing into our own shells and not wanting to face the world, because the world is a very tough place at the moment. But if we do take the step of actually wanting to communicate again, like Ria did, then there needs to be an conscious effort to want to build these safe spaces again. We are not feeling safe now. We're feeling very unsafe. We're feeling threatened by so many different things, right? Not just the virus, but about our future, about education, about relationships that we haven't been able to nurture for so long. When school reopens, I've actually heard young people say, will I be able to talk to my friends like that, like the way I used to? Can we hang out the way that we used to? Have I lost that skill? Things like that, So compassion towards not just others, but self as well. Compassion towards self and saying that, yeah, it's all right. I haven't been able to, live up to all my own expectations, and that's okay, right? And of course, compassion for the other people. And in this compassion, being able to listen to each other. And when I say listen, it's not just about hearing, but it's listening not just through ears, but your eyes and your hearts, right? To be able to, and you know what happens when we are going through crises and when we have difficult times, and you're sharing with somebody who cares for you. Sometimes perhaps an older person, sometimes maybe a parent or a teacher or a friend. Oftentimes they get very anxious because they want to find you a solution. They want to fix it for you, isn't it? Yeah. And you might be doing the same with some of your friends, and you might jump in and come up with suggestions even before the other person has completed what they have had to say, right? And that is where the deep listening comes in, where you stop and just soak it in, not with the aim of finding or figuring out what the solutions will be, not just with the focus of, I want to sort this for my friend, I want to sort this for my younger sibling. It may not come immediately, it might come through a lot of other reflections. At that moment, it is just about the listening, right? And then after you've listened and understood the other person's point of view, then you put your own. And that's where the collaborative approach comes. You, me, and we. And then what can we do together? And these are things that can happen when you're fighting about screen time at home. It can happen about bedtime, right? It could happen about, some friend not being reciprocating and not, answering your messages and chats, and you're getting anxious about it. And you're reaching out, and this person after 2-3 days, thumbs up, and you could either get angry with them, upset with them, or just say that, hey, what happened? This is not how you are usually, and let the other person speak, and then soak it in and say, I understand where you're coming from, but you know what? I really missed you, and I need you at this time. So how can we do this together? Things like that. That's how the collaborative approach works and makes the space emotionally safe, right? Again, and you can begin to trust people again, right? And of course, being respectful towards each other, towards your thoughts, your feelings, especially about personal spaces. And I'm emphasizing this because so many young people and adults also, and I can speak for myself, we've struggled in our families with personal spaces because there's such a lack of it. Earlier on, we could, take a walk, again, like I said, go to a cafe, take a walk in the park, meet up with an old friend that you haven't met for a long time, take a break from each other. And that actually helps relationships to grow, Whereas if there is too much of seeing each other, sometimes it can become really ugly. Yeah. And if you're able to do some of this, creatively, um, you know, uh, make an effort to build these safe spaces again, to have the compassion towards each other, then we can begin to build trust again. Yeah. So the second or the last pair, I would say, is connect and community. So connect, of course, I'm sure, and when I club it with community, is in a way self-explanatory because it's to do with connections with people. Again, building your little families in different places again, and so on. But connection is not just with people, and that's my contention. Connection is also with nature, with the activities that you do. It is with your inner space. Yeah, like Harshad, I really liked what you talked about in the introduction, especially your metaphor of, turning from metaphors to pupas now, isn't it? Yeah, and this is the time to actually withdraw and dig deep inside, isn't it? That's another kind of connection from connections with your own self, your own inner space, your own resources within, isn't it? Yeah. And how do you do that? Because we've lost so much of it, right? Yeah. So connecting to roots is something that we have often talked about in families and amongst young people, which is to do with the structure at home. Because as I was saying, that the external determinants or what actually often would build the structure, like going to school and coming back, and the rhythms of daily life. In the weekend you would plan something, go out with friends or family, visit your cousins. After exams you would plan a holiday. There's so many different things that you would structure, and the institutions and the rhythms of life would actually hold it together. But we don't have that anymore. So we have to be adaptive. We have to think on our toes, and we have to figure out as to what can we do with the time that we have at home together, right? And again, this is a collective knowledge or wisdom, if you like, from different families and people we've worked with. And what we have figured is that even if you do not have such a structured routine like we used to do, we can definitely aim for a more flexible structure. And how do you do that? And some of them have come up with ideas such as that we could discuss how your new role as a student, yeah, or as a professional, or a breadwinner, or a homemaker looks like now. It's work from home, it's school from home, and it's online classes and homework. Is that all your life, being a student? Is that all you can aspire to be? Certainly not. I mean, you can make it much more creative. You can look at videos on Khan Academy. You can go and look at a great documentary in the subject that you really like. You can make a PowerPoint presentation and said, hey, I want to present this to some of my friends who have the same subject, or read a book and want to discuss it, something relevant perhaps to your curriculum, and want to discuss it with your sibling or your parent who's also interested in it. So you can make the life of a student so much more interactive and interesting. And similarly, for professionals and homemakers, they can also do that. So oftentimes, we would talk about having a drop-down list of what will my day look like as a student? What are the kind of different activities that I can do? And there could be 5 to 10 different kinds of activities that fills that space. And you don't have to do every one of them every day. You can pick and choose, right? Similar to that, you can also, in these times, I'm sure that many of you have done household chores because of lack of home help and all of that, and again, tick have a drop down list and say, I can help in these 3-4 things. You can volunteer and have that list as well. And yet again, you don't have to do it every day of the week. You can pick and choose and see where the need is. And of course, there could be family time, right? And you can again discuss what can you do as a family, and again have a list of things which you collaboratively together decide that these are the few things that we can do together as a family. And once you've decided that, every evening take stock of things and say, let me see how I've done as a student and how I've done in helping the family and with household chores, and what have I done to connect to my family. And then based on that, plan the next day and say, tomorrow is going to look perhaps a little different. I'm quite satisfied. I think I've done 60-70% of the things I set out to do, but tomorrow maybe I'll tweak it a little, makes things interesting, and yet gives it a kind of a loose structure. And with schools still not showing any signs of opening in the very immediate future. I know some of the classes are opening. I don't quite know whether your school is, but I do know of a few others where they've started opening schools for students once in a week, for a very limited time. Yeah, but it might still take a long time for it to become a good combination of offline and online, right? It still is probably, it weighs heavily on the online side, right? Yeah, and you might want to actually incorporate some of how you could make a flexible loose structure to the day, and that could make you feel quite rooted. Yeah. And of course, how do you connect to your vision, right? Because that's something that has got so mercilessly taken away. Because if you think about it, a lot of what we, the way we lead our lives is about our future, right? The college that we want to go to, the badminton player that I want to become, right? Or the holiday that I want to take after my board exams get over. It's all about what's going to happen then. And what we do today is based on what we're looking at, our vision. Some in the long term, some an overarching vision of who I want to become, what professional, what kind of a person I want to aspire to become, what are the values that I want to inculcate, what are the skills that I want to develop. All those kind of things bring hope, and it gives us a sense of purpose and direction. And unfortunately, in this pandemic, that's got very sort of ruthlessly taken away. Yeah. So I have during this time read some a particular book on this concept, this Japanese concept called wabi-sabi. And wabi-sabi actually is a concept which has been adopted by the West, in simply meaning that it's about imperfection. So people, buy expensive pottery, break it and fix it again and say this is wabi-sabi. That's actually a very superficial take on it, honestly. Wabi-sabi is much deeper, and it comes with centuries of Japanese wisdom, where they talk about two main things. One is that nothing is perfect. Anything that you set out to do, any person, any situation, always is, has something that you can do better. It's always imperfect. So that's one. And the second thing is that nothing is permanent. Yeah. The impermanence of things, whether it's a relationship that you have, it's a certain rite of passage that you're going through while you're going from school to college. It's going to come and go. Nothing will stay, good or bad. Good times will come and go, bad times will come and go. Yeah. And to understand that, firstly, nothing will stay. And indeed, if you look at it a little more deeply and closely, it empowers you, because most of the time, we are seeking perfection. Most of us are. And we are setting our, sort of expectations very, very high indeed. And when we can't beat them, we berate ourselves, isn't it? We come down heavily on ourselves. So a lot of what we think about ourselves is to do with the goals we set and the seeking of perfection. The moment you step down from that and say that, I'm going to, this is the goal, I'll try my best, but I know that I'll probably get to 70, 80% with the best of effort. And that's all right. The moment you say that, firstly, you're easier on yourself. Secondly, you always know there's scope for improvement. There's always scope to build on where you've reached. See how, magical it becomes then, the moment you take that stand. And the second thing is that if something is going to be this impermanent, I better stop and engage with it. Rather than just think of the future or the past, let me live in the present, because this is not going to stay. So I better make maximum of it. So living in the moment actually comes from there. Staying with the present comes from this understanding of imperfection and impermanence, right? And I think these times, this pandemic has taught this like no other time, right? And I think that all of us have in many ways learned how to stay in the present and derive from the small joys of life. Yeah. So again, I mean, because we haven't been able to connect to our future in a very robust way, we often have talked about bringing back memories and meaning, revisiting the past, rewriting our stories, so to say. So dipping into, books and videos and old photographs and bringing up those memories and re-looking at them, because most of the times we hardly find time to actually look at the pictures we've taken. How many of you would have gone for a holiday, taken loads of pictures and never looked at them again? I mean, it happens to me all the time, and that's because we don't have the time to do it. But now we can, and we can actually begin to look at it and say, do you remember that time that we went for a holiday with our cousins, and what a lovely time we had in the on the beach? And to bring that back and to remember those rich experiences, and perhaps in some ways even reconfigure them in our own minds, which is what we call rewriting our own stories, right? Of course, making a safe social bubble, the collectives, and all kinds of different activities that you can think about. And the last thing is PQ. And you'd be surprised with this term. You would have heard of IQ and EQ, I'm sure. EQ must be very high, a hot topic of discussion in your school. The PQ is playfulness quotient. Yeah. Actually, there is no measure for it, right? But we believe in it in Children First. We believe that if you can bring playfulness back into our lives, especially as we're growing up, how oftentimes adults would say, don't be silly, don't behave like a child. And I think that's silly. I mean, I think that's so sad that adults have lost their ability to have fun and to play and let their hair down. And I think the more we are able to do it in these times, if we can actually be silly, if we can play and have fun, and joke around, then a lot of this trauma and this anguish that we're going through is going to get minimized. And the last thing that I'm going to, touch upon before I finish is connecting to values and purpose, and indeed have the courage to question the given. And this is the time to do it, right? And indeed realize what we have done to our planet. And I'm sure, and I hope a lot of you, or most of you, would have recognized the kind of change that came about, even in the NCR, in Delhi, definitely even in the mountains and hills. I hear people talk about it here, that they could, see, small towns and cities on hilltops, which they had stopped seeing completely. But after the lockdown, the vision, the distance into which you could look, that had changed. And we know that that happened in Delhi NCR. The pollution levels went down dramatically. Birds came out. It suddenly seemed so much greener since last year, isn't it? It gives us an impression as to what we have done to our planet. And of course, we have been talking about global warming and all the cyclones and the earthquakes and all of that have started happening with increasing frequency. So that are connected to nature and education, of course. What is education after all, and what defines success? Is it getting yourself a BMW at 25, or is it about getting a professorial post in a Ivy League, or is it about saving our trees, or is it about compassion towards people who do not have as much as we do? What is success about? Redefine it, right? And again, I heard Mr. Sugata mention this, that please don't go back to the normal. And I urge you to do the same. So should we seek to return to how things were, or create a new normal, right? And we have the opportunity to create something of our choice, of our intent. It's not going to be easy. There'll be lots of challenges, but and that's where we hope that our younger generation, you all listening to this, hopefully, and realizing the kind of power and scope and opportunity you have. Indeed, you can make our world better. I think our generation has, in many ways damaged it in ways that we hope that you will be able to, repair. And of course, ask if less is indeed more, because we've learned, I think, to live with less. And can we do that? Can we look at that? Yeah. And rather than, going after this constant material pursuit of things, isn't it? Yeah. So with that, I'm going to stop. And I'm going to, stop with this quote from one of my favorite human beings, Nelson Mandela. He said, "I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." I think a lot of what we have, learned during these times is to do with that. And the triumph has to come in stages. It has to come in steps. It has to be collaborative. It has to be together. And it is often to do with sensitivity, compassion, introspection, understanding, and then being able to overcome these hard times. So I'll stop here. I'll stop my screen share and I'll take some questions if you have any.
Thank you, sir. I'm sure that incredibly insightful talk must have led to a few questions rising among the students present here.
Sure.
With that, we begin the question and answer session to satisfy our thriving curiosities.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Sir,
Namaste,
therapy and counseling are still very uncomfortable subjects for a lot of parents. So how should we approach our parents if we feel we might need help?
Okay, that's a great question, Shaurya. See, you're absolutely right. I think the stigma about mental health and therapy and counseling has been very deep-seated in our culture. And that's the last thing most often, parents will take their young people for, because they think that it's a sign of weakness. If other people get to know what will happen to the reputation of the family, and so on and so forth. There's so many different myths that go with it, right? And it also, there is a notion that if you go for a psychiatrist or a psychologist for counseling or therapy, there must be a defect in you. There must be something wrong with you deeply, and which will probably last for life. You may not be able to come out of this anymore. But, again, and I'm urging this for all of you young people and other adults who are listening to this conversation, is that this pandemic has taught us that mental health challenges can affect anybody and everybody. From people who were flying in their respective fields, top students ready to go to the best colleges, slightly older young adults who were ready to, embark on their, career and journey of a fantastic career, etc. So many of them have turned to us who have never ever availed of, mental health services with symptoms of depression, of anxiety, sometimes substance use, sometimes screen addiction, and sometimes very dangerous behaviors of self-harm even. And that tells us that it's not just a small defective minority that gets mental health difficulties or who need it. It is important to understand that anybody who goes through a very stressful period, like we have done as a community, can have the need to. And if we do not address it right now, it actually might damage you in a manner that will last for years to come. On the other hand, if you address it, it has actually helped you to overcome it. That's the key thing. That's the key thing. It's seen the other way. It's seen upside down. It's seen as if that if you went to a psychologist for counseling or therapy, you'll never recover from it. It's quite the opposite. You have a much better chance of understanding your own self. Dive into your own resources and help yourself then, right? And become a person that you want to be then. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. And I'm pretty sure that the teenagers present in this session will follow that advice.
And you could actually talk about this, in terms of statistics, in terms of, just to also mention that even earlier on, the prevalence or the number of young people from 15 to 25 years of age who would report symptoms of anxiety or depression were about 20 to 25%. It's a huge number, right? In this pandemic, it's gone up 5 times. So you can imagine 5 times. And these are large-scale WHO studies, which actually has corroborated this, in different countries, including ours. And that gives you an idea that certainly the majority, certainly more than 50%, if not 70, 75% young people have gone through very, very difficult times emotionally and with regard to their mental health. And it's important for our older generation to understand it. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sir, we've heard you talk about being the invisible child, being singled out due to failures. So, how can we help friends who may be invisible in our classes?
Okay, I'm glad you have asked this question, Radhika. I'm glad that you want to do this. Yes, I have spoken about it. I've experienced it. We also work with a lot of young people who are marginalized, maybe because they have a certain so-called disability, like they may not be able to read or write that well. They may be racially different. They could, again, sometimes due to religion or the manner in which they talk. I've faced this, discrimination even due to my complexion in school, and people actually taunting me and, sometimes distancing themselves for that. So there are many factors, and it's important to understand this, Radhika, that there are some people who are more vulnerable than others, and those could be people with disability or who may have some difficulties with their gender or sexuality. Sometimes they feel very marginalized. Although the LGBTQ plus community has come up in a big way and have now a very clear voice, but still they might struggle. And equally, like people who migrate from other places, who speak a different language, who might speak English or Hindi in a different accent, and they get ridiculed and picked upon, isn't it? And it's important to first understand that, when bullying and discrimination happens, sometimes it goes completely unnoticed because we are so used to it. And many times we believe that we should not get involved in this matter, right? Sometimes out of fear, sometimes because we think that it's not our business. But by being bystanders, in some ways, we are actually, encouraging it to happen more, right? So my biggest sort of suggestion would be, don't be a bystander. If you see it happening and you can sense it, if you squirm in the way somebody is talking to another person who cannot retaliate or who doesn't have the gumption or the stature at that moment to take it up, or perhaps not, they don't have the confidence for some reason. Sometimes young people go through very difficult situations in their family. They might have lost a family member. They might be going through other transitions in the family, which are very difficult, and they can go through phases when they feel very vulnerable and they get picked upon, and to be able to stand up to them and say, this is not okay, and we have to do something about it. get it into the conversation, about what causes discrimination and how we can all collectively stand up to it. That becomes really important then. Yeah?
Thank you, sir. I'm sure many can benefit from your advice.
I hope so.
So, does seeing someone suffer have an impact on your own mental well-being? And if so, how have you grown more conscious of it and also equipped yourself to deal with it?
Yes, Sakshi, I think it can do. It can do. It depends on your relationship with the person. It depends on your own sensitivities and your own life experiences, right? In any stressful situation, if you're able to, with your resources or resources from your environment, if you're able to overcome it, you feel stronger. You become what is called more resilient, right? So if you've had experiences which has made you more resilient, you'll probably be able to deal with your friends or somebody else's suffering better, or at least not feel so vulnerable yourself, right? So you have to ask yourself, am I equipped to deal with this, right? Or should I, with the person's permission, involve somebody else who's perhaps more equipped? It could be another friend, it could be a teacher, it could be, an older sibling, whoever you think will be in a position to have that sensitivity and, ability to help, right? But that's a question, that's a personal question you have to ask, that are you feeling completely helpless? Are you feeling so unnerved and traumatized that you just don't know what to do? Then it probably is not going to be good for you, right? But if you feel empathy, you feel the pain of this friend or whoever it might be that you're witnessing, but you know that you can help. That not only helps the other person, but also empowers you. Not just in terms of values, that you become a better person, which I'm sure most of us will agree here, but you also become more resilient because you've helped a person. And that's what Ria did. When she was going through a very difficult phase, she actually reached out to other people who had also had major losses, and she helped them. And that actually made her much more empowered. And this is again borne out by research that during crises and disasters, the young people who actually contribute to society and who reach out to help others. And this has happened during the tsunami that we had many years ago, or the earthquake in Gujarat that happened nearly 2 decades ago. So there were workers in the mental health field who encouraged young people to come out and help rebuild the community again, to help other young people, maybe younger people even, and so on, right? And those young people, those teenagers and young adults actually came out much better in terms of their mental health. So they then concluded that altruism during crises like this, it actually helps. If you're altruistic, if you're able to reach out and help other people. So thank you for that question, Sakshi. That's very important in these times.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions, do you think? So we are almost out of time, I think. Yeah. I mean, if there is, I'll be very happy to discuss any other thing that comes up. Yes, Jugnuma.
So we can take one more question from the students, and then we have a couple of questions from the audience, if that is all right with you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir. So, how large of an impact do you think childhood and upbringing plays in the shaping of our personality?
Well, all the impact. So, they often say that growing up and who you become is a interaction between nature and nurture, right? So, and the jury's out about which is more important and so on. Perhaps it's 50-50, to be fair. And also with our experiences that we have, there is something that we inherit and we are born with. So I'm sure you know that we all have a blueprint, and each one of us can do certain things well and not be comfortable with certain other things. But what shapes all those things, what interacts with that template, is the environment outside. So upbringing, parenting, the family that you grow up in, the school that you grow up, go to, the friends that you have, they have deep impact in the way you grow up. Whether it is in terms of how you feel about yourself, right? Whether you feel good about yourself, The kind of skills you develop is also dependent on the environment you get, opportunities you get, right? And the sense of identity you have due to the belongingness. I belong here. This is my school. These are the values that they stand for. And they then become your own, isn't it? And you carry them for years to come. You might want to question them from time to time, and you always have that opportunity. But for the first 25 years of your life, I can tell you, and indeed adolescence lasts till 25, the environmental factors play a huge, huge role in shaping who you are.
I totally agree, sir. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Shaurya. Yeah.
So the ideas that you expressed are so true and relatable. I mean, we are all facing this and going through this. The Ria that you mentioned, I think we have come across her, and we in parts are also, facing the same issues that you mentioned she is facing, and maybe coping with the same things. So it has been a
Thank you, Sundar.
very interesting and very relatable session, sir. Yeah. So now we'll move on to the audience question. The first question is that usually we see adults manifesting their stress and anxiety in many ways, but the same does not happen with children. They seem to internalize it and thus suffer more. So what can be done for in such cases?
So I think the awareness that children can respond differently is the first thing that is most valuable. As I was saying that, fear, anxiety can manifest in different ways, from, the sleep cycle and the food habits going completely all right, to having, multiple physical symptoms of, a loss of energy and exhaustion, to having mood swings, many times, mood swings, back chatting, being on the edge, lashing out, banging doors, sometimes when it becomes even more, throwing things or getting into big fights at home, and so on. And unfortunately, what happens is that usually the focus becomes the behavior. And because the behavior from an adult point of view is not right, and they might see it as being disrespectful or rude or disruptive, or what kind of a human being are you turning out to be, and so on. It could be to do with values. What adults often miss out on is the underlying feeling. So the behaviors don't come alone. There's always something happening underlying inside the young person, which manifests as a behavior, isn't it? Which triggers the behavior. And if we are able to identify, if we are able to connect to that feeling, take a step back and say, oh my God, you seem extremely upset and angry. What made you so? You're not usually like this. Can we talk about it? So creating that emotionally safe space that I talked about during that, during our previous, discussion a few minutes ago, is to do with that. If we are able to create a space where children and young people can talk without feeling judged, without feeling admonished or rebuked or scolded or punished, not get consequences, then they are able to begin to get in touch with their feelings and express them. And that's crucial. Yeah. So don't go on the behavior is what I would suggest to adults, but look, beneath it. Stop for a moment and don't react and respond to just the behavior and try to discipline your child and correct your child prematurely. But stop and ask, what is it that's making you behave like this? What are you feeling? You must be feeling terrible to say those things to your mother, for instance, right? Yeah. And then the young person might break down and talk about their, inner world, how frustrated they might be or how desperate they're feeling in these times. And that's a window to their inner world, right? And we must know as adults how to connect with them.
Absolutely, sir. But at the moment of defiance, it is very difficult for an adult not to react. Oftentimes, we resort to reaction. Although, in our right frame of mind, we may not do that, as you suggested. But yes, that's a difficult thing to learn also.
It is. So I think that when, as parents, as teachers, as adults who work with young people, we grow up as well. I think my biggest growing up days after my, childhood and adolescence has been as a parent. And I have had to repeatedly step back and tell myself, that's not the way to talk to your child, right? and to be able to say that, acknowledge, and even go and apologize and say, I'm so sorry I spoke to you like that. That was not called for. I came from my own frustration. And I'm sorry, I was really anxious. That's why I spoke like that. I apologize to you. And to do that genuinely, I think adults need to learn to apologize and to connect to young people like that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I've done that
They
multiple
don't
times
come
with
with
my
a
own children.
manual.
No.
Yes, they don't come with a manual. So yes,
They
we
don't.
also have to learn. So the other question is, can you suggest a few books that can help parents equip themselves to handle stress and anxiety among children?
The one that we use often in all our trainings, etc., is a book called All You Need Is Love, The Art of Mindful Parenting. It's written by Dr. Shillong Sen, and it's readily available. That's one book that we use as a template often when we talk about parenting, and even sometimes when we talk about when we work with schools, we use that. So it's called the 5C model, and I have used it here as well, partly. So the connect, and part of that I've taken from that book and those ideas. So I think that could be a great resource, right? And besides that, there are of course umpteen number of books which talk about how to understand difficult behaviors in children, and how, again, like I was saying, not to just look at the behaviors, but to understand where it's coming from, right? Again, there's another book called The Difficult Child, and I forget the author, but again, that's something that we have read a few years ago as we were training and stuff like that, and that it again, a difficult child, a child who challenges you, there's much more to the child than what you see outside. Yeah, and it's important to understand that. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. There's so many nuggets of wisdom that we take away from this session with you. Thank you for sharing all of this information with us.
Not at all. It's been my pleasure interacting with all of you. Thank you for inviting me to this absolutely wonderful forum. And I hope you all the success, and I hope you are able to, no doubt take care of yourself, but also, be in that introspective space, individually, collectively, and please help us, find a better tomorrow. And that'll be my message to all the young people who are listening today. I think they will give us a second chance. I think we've spoiled our earth in many different ways that only they can resurrect. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Dr. Sen, thank you. I've hijacked this from a teacher just to, personally thank you. I know you are in the hills. I know you were on vacation, but really you've been a true SMILE ambassador through the year. So thank you for taking the time out to be with us today. I think both adolescents and adults, have been inspired by you, and I think they're, like ma'am said, taking back a lot of nuggets from you. So thank you for taking out this time for us.
Not at all, Charu ma'am. It's been my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I started this session by saying that I was certain that we would be able to relate to Dr. Sen's thoughts and benefit from them. And I think we can all agree that Dr. Sen has done that for us. His perspective on the effects of the pandemic has let us all know that we were and are not alone in our struggle through this time. And his understanding of courage, based off of the themes of acceptance, compassion, connection, and community, I am sure has helped us all get a hold of how we can make it through this deadly pandemic better than we were before. Our sincere gratitude to Dr. Sen for being with us today. I'm certain that each one of us here, no matter where we've come from or what we've been through, have found something relevant and profound in your words. In these unprecedented times, I'm sure your words have found a new light for all of us.
Thank you, Harshaditya. Thank you so much indeed. Bye then. I'll take your leave. Bye. Namaste.
Namaste. At a time when the world stood still and doors closed for all, we smiled and reached out to connect with the community, opening up windows of opportunities and possibilities for all. We took care to ensure that no one felt left out or alone as we sang and made art together, inspired, listened to, and energized each other, confident and positive that as each one of us played our part, we would change the world one smile at a time. And helping us to do so were all of you, our partner organizations, who beamed our smile bigger, broader, and brighter with your thoughtful, reflective, and happy contributions. We thank you for standing beside and believing that together we can. At the brink of the culmination now, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to you the terrific triad, as we call them, the three pillars behind SMILE. Miss Sarita Dadwal, the force behind the birthing of every smile, each week for the past 60 weeks. Miss Shayuri Banerjee, the link that reached out into the world and helped us to bring our communities together. And finally, Miss Pooja Jhavar, our chairperson, the fountainhead of NiBS, and the SMILE initiative, one who dares to dream such that they become a joyful reality. For truly, as Walt Disney said, all our dreams can come true if only we have the courage to pursue them.
We are happy to welcome the representatives of our partner organizations who are here with us today. From Bombay International School, Mumbai, we have Ms. Neeta Rao, Head of Primary School, along with Ms. Dhruvi Dharia. From Chikkar International School, Bareilly, we have Ms. Nishma Malhotra with Avishi Dubey and Sara Singh. From Truk Padma Karpur School, Ladakh, we have Ms. Mingur Ankmo, Principal, along with Rigzin Shosfeld and Sultan Gyatso. From KC High School, Chennai, we have Ms. Ishwarya Dakubati, accompanied by Bala Subramaniam and Akhiladitya. From Pallikodam, Kerala, we have Ms. Shiva Paul with Jacob Matthew and Anisha Matthew. From Study Hall, we have Ms. Bhavna Virendra with Tasneem Khan, Rohan Nath, and Drone Pandey. And from London International Gallery of Children's Art, we have Ms. Paola Longobardi. The students from the SMILE partner schools participated in the SMILE Together We Can project, specially designed to encourage creativity, collaboration, initiative, and community engagement. As students came together to be the change, one smile at a time, sharing ideas, talents, and skills, celebrating the miraculous power of togetherness. It's now time for sharing reflections from our SMILE community.
We have some questions that will surely take all of you down the memory lane. So we'll start with Bombay International School. Neeta ma'am, we have a question for you. A new idea that sparked in your school during these turbulent times.
Thank you so much for inviting us and inviting us to participate in this program in the first place. It was a true privilege. You know, and it aligns so well with what we already do at Bombay International that it was very easy for us to incorporate it into our vision as well for students.
We actually have a student leadership, which we call our social change and peace ambassadors. And we actually took on the project initially with our ambassadors, and they participated in it. So how we did this was basically we went through the entire philosophy of SMILE. We discussed it and personally thought how we would like to make our contribution. So when we got the weekly activities to contribute to. We found them, one, extremely engaging. We found them extremely creatively designed. It was something that actually really challenged us to one, think outside the box, and two, actually be reflective about how we could spread just not smile, but empathize. Right. So that was something that really came across in our discussions. And actually, some of our kids have done some really very small contributions, not very consistent ones though, but very small contributions. Like one of our kids actually composed a piece of music. One of our kids actually shared a photograph of it was the black and white theme, and he shared this really lovely photograph of a giraffe which was in a black and white theme, and it was like a cross like that, which was really beautifully done.
Speak about different points of view, because it no longer then is restricted to a holistic well-being initiative, but I think through the arts learn to begin to appreciate different points of view. So thank you for sharing that.
In fact, at BIS, we're very, very inclined to the arts. When we did get the PDFs and when we did go through the activities, it just almost seemed very natural for us to be able to do that. Thank you for having us partner with you and considering us as a partner organization.
Thank you. Chikar International School, Nishima ma'am.
Good evening, yes, ma'am.
We just wanted to know.
My students have already picked up one activity because they wanted to speak about everything, but I think they've streamlined one where they would be able to speak. Abhishi would be able to tell more about it.
I think the M of SMILE has made us all understand that the actual aim of art is not just representing the outward appearance of an object, but also the inward significance. So out of all the M activities that I've come across, I personally liked chiaroscuro, the art of the light and shadow.
As on a personal note,
This art form is a high contrast between the bright and dark side of an object, without which we can't get the third dimension, that is depth. I personally found this concept very innovative because this underlying idea can be used to make people optimistic about what we have in these hard times, instead of being depressed about what we have lost in the last few years. So I think a thumbs up to chiaroscuro from my side. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
How would you relate this to life, Avicii? How would you relate this concept of light and dark and shadow to real life?
Ma'am, I had contributed a coronavirus painting, which was black and white, and a chiaroscuro entity. So I personally wanted to show that everything has both the sides, positive and negative. Like we have been thinking that coronavirus is just negativity all around, people getting depressed, people getting sad. We are locked in our houses, but I think it has a positive side as well, because we are able to connect with people, we are staying with our families. So that is what I wanted to represent through that painting, that it has both the bright and the dark side.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, Sarah, I'll ask you this. A color that you would associate with your school and why?
Okay, so good evening, everyone. The color I would like to associate with my school and my teachers is, of course, orange. Orange is a mixture of red and yellow, and it represents success, creativity, warmth, energy, joy, and no prizes for guessing it right, that there's no place better on this whole earth than a school which can truly portray what these words mean. When one enters a school, one sees the exuberance of children. One sees the spring of life, that is childhood, being celebrated, and surely not to forget the teachers and the school instill in us the confidence and the success required for the future. But I would also like to mention here that no color is worthy or meritorious enough to put into words what a school can mean to a student, like to me, or I believe anyone out there, because the contribution a school has in a student's life is just unparalleled. Thank you.
So Casey, hi, Ishwarya ma'am.
how did Smile help you connect with your community?
I think I can speak for all of us and say on Fridays we definitely did look forward to this challenge, and we were always amazed by the amount of work and the thought process that went behind each of it. So I really want to begin by saying that on a positive note. And I think the Smile Challenges was such a diverse mix of activities. I think, as we were discussing earlier as well, it ranged from art and craft, dance to music. And I think the idea of having it as read, think, and then do really reflected the idea and pushed the children to think beyond as well, which I think, as someone else mentioned as well, very much aligns with what we do in school. So a lot of the times we would use these activities in class as well to connect with the learners. So we saw a lot of times that this brought all the parents, teachers, and the kids together as a common space, something that we could all do together. So we saw that when parents and children had an aligned interest, say maybe for an art or something, we saw that they both together sent us in their entries. So it was so nice to see. There was like the parents' perspective of an artwork as well as the child's perspective of an artwork, which clearly showed that it was such a beautiful opportunity for them to do something together and have a conversation about it. I think I remember very vividly there was this one particular challenge about this Scandinavian seed vault, if I'm right. I think it was a global seed vault, which was in Norway. And I think it was just amazing to hear the perspectives that came out from the children, that if such a doomsday did ever arrive, what are the things that they would protect in that vault? And it wasn't just from the children, but it also extended to the teachers, because even we were discussing. It was nice to hear it from a 7-year-old's perspective, a 17-year-old's perspective, and from maybe someone even much older. So I think that way it was lovely because it brought about all the age groups together. So it truly did feel like a community thing to do.
I think Smile was envisioned to transcend all boundaries, whether of age or otherwise. It helped bring families together. And yes, you're absolutely right. There were so many contribution and entries that kind of came in with the family doing things together. And that was the whole objective, so that no one really, felt left out or alone.
Now coming to Bala and Akhil, which Smile activity did you enjoy doing with your family or friends maybe?
Auntie, may I speak?
Yes, Akhil.
So I actually like two activities. One was making a drawing where we were supposed to draw, we are supposed to draw someone in the village or farm field. And I actually drew this with my family, and it was really fun. I did the drawing. My mom and my brother helped me with the coloring, and yeah. And another activity I really liked was when we were supposed to plant a plant. So again, me, my mom, and my brother, we sowed the seeds and we water the plants regularly. And I think some of them are still growing now.
Good.
You take care of them.
My favorite activity with my family would be the punny circles, in which where we take a paper and draw a circle, and each of the family members should draw their own face. And
Face,
the
yes.
twist to it is where we have to name each of our family members with a pun. So, like even like your mom would have it as monumental, since it starts with an M. So this activity was actually really fun. Like my dad was really surprised. I've never seen him draw with my mother, and it was a really good family bonding activity. And after which, when we like, I also explored the works of the cartoonist R.K. Lakshman. I was really fascinated with how he dealt with serious political and social issues with a touch of funness and not in a very serious manner. So this made me also think and have a lot of fun with my family, and I really enjoyed this activity.
So what was yours?
Your, yeah.
Yes. What was added to your name? I'd like to know, Bala.
So for my name, Bala, I didn't add anything to my name as such, but for my dad, his name is my mom. For my dad, I actually did add since it was I added his Papa, so I made his Papaya. So that was something I added.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Coming to Pallikodam, Shiva ma'am, what appealed the most to you about the SMILE initiative and why?
COVID caught us unaware, shook us up, and made us wonder, adapt, and be creative, not just in one area, but in all facets of life. And we, the teachers across the globe, across the state, and across the syllabi, made us take the plunge and without a moment's hesitation. And so we started off the academic year 2020-2021, juggling between teaching online and learning online tools that suit our needs best. Soon, the initial excitement seemed to fizzle out. And then, as if God sent to break away from the shackles of academics, SMILE came floating across and landed in Pallikodam. And one day I got a call from our vice principal asking if I could take this up. And that's how I became part of the SMILE. SMILE. What a beautiful anagram. You can't say that without a smile. I involuntarily smiled each time I got a call or a message from Shayuri. And I had the biggest smile when I read through each weekly brochure and excitedly discussed each smile with my children in Standard 5. Soon the SMILE fever caught on, and the other teachers asked me if they could join too. And now I feel, oh, is this really coming to an end? Like all beautiful journeys that holds a million magical moments and friendships that will surely last a lifetime. In short, SMILE. S, sparked imagination. M, made us think. I, made them think beyond I. Why me? To, why not? L, looking forward to each weekend of fun. E, everything wrapped up in a magical package. In a world where people tend to be selfish about the good things that they have, thank you, Nirmal Bhartia, for sharing this wonderful concept to all of us across India, across the world. What more can I say?
It's beautifully.
Thank you, yes.
Beautifully shared.
Jacob and Anisha, one passion that SMILE inspired you to pursue.
First of all, I like to say that the idea of this program SMILE is wonderful. Plus, the full form of SMILE, sing, make, ignite, listen, and energize was really creative. People who participated in it became very enthusiastic. We got a lot of information and all from the SMILE. It was very fun doing this program. SMILE inspired to draw simple paintings to even hydraulic cardboard models. SMILE helped us to occupy valuable time also. Therefore, SMILE made us understand hard topics easy. I truly love this program. Thanks.
After SMILE came in with different topics for us to write about and think about, I started imagining and thinking about different things in different perspectives, and I improved a lot in writing and drawing.
I think SMILE gave the confidence to try. There was no, and I think that goes with the arts, that there were no right or wrong answers. So there were no right or wrong drawings, and each one was different, and each one was equally special.
Bhavna ma'am from Study Hall. Bhavna ma'am, please share how did SMILE help you connect with your school community?
They say when there are clouds in the sky, you will get by if you smile through your fear and sorrow. And truly, this great thought process of conceptualizing something as purposeful as this turned our days from drab to fab and kept us meaningfully engaged when we were reeling under the crisis of the pandemic and we couldn't meet each other physically. We as educators were missing the peals of laughter of our students in the school corridors, and they were missing the school student community so much that we were all lost in desolation. At that time, the SMILE newsletters came like a whiff of fresh air and brought us all together on the digital platform like never before, and reaffirmed our faith in the fact that learning never stops. We look forward to each of the newsletters, and they became a reason to communicate and discuss each new activity with each other every Friday. Now, these interactions kept us meaningfully engaged and brought forth newer and fresher perspectives. We bonded well and could revive the trail of active communication yet again. Each time there was an inward journey, and it brought out the best in us. The smiles on the faces of our students were priceless as they saw their work being beamed all across on Instagram. So thank you once again for connecting us to the larger world student community. And this is a bond that will remain forever. So thank you.
What did you feel when your SMILE edition was beamed?
Actually, when we first saw the sample that Nirmal Bharati School sent, the first thing that we noticed was a lot of colors. So in our newsletter, we wanted to incorporate colors, and that's from there the discussion about the theme started. So from colors, we came to rainbow, then to Rubik's Cube, which was the main theme of our newsletter. And when it was finally prepared, of course, the joy and contentment doubled. But the thing that struck me most was how the students
and Rohan
it and how they perceived one task in so many different ways. So they all had different perception of one task, and I loved how SMILE gave us an opportunity to allow individual expression flourish in a collaborative space.
The creative mind, how we integrated the creative mind into exploring the outside world, the environmental issues that are there, the social causes and the social gains in the society, and how we were able to integrate it with our creativity using a very small object, the Rubik's Cube, and how we were able to understand it through a very simple manner, because anything can be understood if we go through the basics first. So that helped us get a new perspective on each of these things from a new angle.
So Mingo ma'am, would you like to say something?
Thanking you for having us as our partner school for this very special project. So I want to share share a small song on SMILE. For me, SMILE means smiling through our hard times, make us happy all time, inspire us every day to rise again and again, learning something new in all hard times. And today, the smile together we can with a great hope. So smile together we can until we meet again. Though it's a very hard time for all of us, but you had managed to make each one of us smile. So thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
Coming to Paola ma'am, the London International Gallery of Children's Art.
Hello, hi.
What can we continue doing to beam the smile bigger, broader, and brighter?
First of all, I want to thank you for involving the London International Gallery of Children's Art into this project. Our mission is to encourage creativity, promote education, international understanding, and awareness through cultural exchange. And I think this is exactly what SMILE has been doing for all this month. In difficult times, collaboration and community are key. Together we are stronger, and so through the SMILE you brought together the community. So we really think that we should continue to involve children, families. What I enjoyed the most was to see that we're not only the children involved, but there was the whole family, and to see that it was a complete project. Every newsletter had space for everyone to develop their strengths, their weaknesses. And this is something that, as, let's say, educators, we need to continue. We need to give space to every child, every person to develop their strength and reinforce their, and improve their weaknesses. So in the future, I think we should really continue to promote the the idea behind SMILE of keeping the community together and then learn from each other. Again, coming from Europe with a different perspective, it was so enlightening to see your culture coming through this submission that the children and the families were doing. So we were really enjoyed that. And also we received a lot of artwork from your school that is now part of our international exhibition about COVID that is on our website.
Before we wrap up today's session, let us now get the NiBS SMILE team on the hot seat, which is Shairi ma'am and Sarita ma'am. After SMILE, what next?
I was involved in getting the heartfelt contributions from our community. And I can say I was the gatherer of smiles and then the lighthouse that beamed the smile far and wide through the Instagram post. I got the opportunity to connect with all of you, with a larger number of families, and personally experience the joy, the contributions that you made in the challenging times. Going forward, I think something that can bring the best of humanity, unity, goodness, and smiles to us, and keep smiling edition 2 maybe.
I rather work towards the making of a smile than talking about it. But today, hearing all the children speak about it, it's been incredible. That means that whatever happens, whatever happens in life, our children are equipped. They have that smile within them, and the only way to take it forward is that we continue to walk together. We continue to walk in happiness, health, and kindness. And as a community, we continue to walk together, and keep smiling. That's from my side. Thank you.
We would like to end this session by finally thanking all the partner organizations for spending time with the SMILE community.
And to our dear audience, we thank you for being with us today and encouraging us with your presence. We will see you tomorrow with a relay of sessions and talks with our esteemed Atithis. Taking you through tomorrow's schedule, we have Turning the Tide with Gunj, in conversation with Mr. Anshu Gupta, founder director of Gunj at 4 p.m. Then a session with Ms. Atithi Mangaldas, a world-renowned dancer and choreographer at 5 p.m. The grand finale with the well-known and celebrated singer, Srimati Shubha Mudgalji at 6. Do not forget to log back in to attend these stimulating sessions and interactions with our eminent Atithis. Keep smiling. It's a smile world.